Late at night on an empty street, a 22-year-old student trudged home after another exhausting shift. Balancing school, 2 jobs, and caring for his paralyzed mother had drained nearly all his energy. But when he spotted an elderly man stranded beside a broken electric wheelchair, instinct overrode fatigue. Within minutes, his worn hands became precise, adjusting wires and connections until the machine hummed back to life. The old man's eyes widened in surprise. Jordan only smiled, waved off thanks, and walked away, unaware that this small act would ripple outward and change his future. Before we dive deeper, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and let me know. Jordan's alarm screamed at 5:30 a.m., same as it had every morning for 3 years. The 22-year-old mechanical engineering student rolled out of his narrow bed, careful not to wake his mother in the cramped apartment they shared. From the other room, he already heard her stirring. He laced up his scuffed work boots, slung on his duct-taped backpack, and checked the contents. Textbooks, a dented thermos of instant coffee, and his precious toolkit, each piece bought one by one with money scraped together from delivery runs. Morning. "Mama?" he whispered as he peeked into her room. Sarah, his mother, was already awake, struggling to shift herself into her battered manual wheelchair. Its wheels were worn smooth, the frame groaning with every movement. She'd lived in that chair for 8 years ever since the accident. "You don't have to whisper, baby. I'm up." Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled from medication. "You eating breakfast?" she asked. "I'll grab something at school." They both knew it wasn't true. Rent was due and groceries had run thin. "You sure you can't skip your delivery job tonight? You look tired." Jordan knelt, meeting her eyes. "Mama, the therapy bills won't pay themselves." He forced a smile. "Besides, the rides give me time to think about projects." What he didn't say: every time he watched her strain to push uphill or saw the brakes slip on a slope, it felt like fire in his chest. That fire fueled him through sleepless nights studying thermodynamics and stress analysis. One day he would build her something better, something that could change everything. "I love you. You know that." Her voice cracked. "Love you too, Mama." He kissed her forehead, swung the backpack over his shoulder, and headed out. The morning blurred by in lectures and labs. During stress analysis class, his phone buzzed with a delivery alert. He had time before his evening shift at Tony's auto shop. 20 minutes later, he was weaving through downtown traffic on his beat-up motorcycle when he saw him. At the foot of a steep hill sat an elderly man, motionless beside a silent electric wheelchair. His silver hair caught the fading light, shoulders sagging with exhaustion and frustration. Jordan braked and jogged over. "Hey, you all right?" The man looked up. His eyes, sharp, intelligent but clouded with embarrassment, met Jordan's. He was well-dressed, the kind of crisp shirt and slacks Jordan couldn't imagine affording. "I'm afraid I'm having technical difficulties," the man admitted, gesturing at the dead chair. Stopped at the worst possible spot. Jordan crouched beside the machine, scanning it with practiced eyes. "Mind if I take a look? I'm a mechanical engineering student. Work on cars and bikes, too." The display blinked with an error code Jordan instantly recognized. A motor controller fault, likely an overheating safety trigger. But as he examined further, his brow furrowed. The design was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Sleeker, more advanced. "Almost experimental, sir," Jordan said slowly. "This wheelchair, it's not like the usual models. The engineering is way ahead of what's on the market." The man shifted uncomfortably. "Is that relevant to fixing it?" Jordan grinned, pulling a small screwdriver from his worn kit. "Actually, yeah. See, most wheelchairs have a simple reset procedure. But this one..." Jordan crouched lower, carefully removing a narrow access panel until the wiring was exposed. His fingers found the thermal sensor. "This chair's different," he explained, his voice calm, precise. "It's got a more advanced safety system. The motor overheated on that hill, so it shut itself down to prevent damage. Working quickly, he bypassed the thermal lockout and reset the controller. The machine gave a faint hum, then powered back to life. The man blinked in astonishment as the lights flickered green across the control panel. "But here's the problem," Jordan added, still adjusting wires. "If you hit another steep incline, this'll happen again. The motor's running too hot." He tightened a connection, rerouted a small component. I just tweaked the cooling system. Should help airflow and buy you some time. The old man stared. How could you possibly know how to do that? Jordan stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. Like I said, I study this stuff, and my mom's been in a wheelchair for 8 years. I've had to learn to fix just about everything that can go wrong with them. He hesitated, glancing at the sleek lines of the chair, though I've never seen one as advanced as this. What's your name, son? Jordan Hayes, the man extended his hand. Samuel Whitaker. And I cannot thank you enough. Jordan shook it, surprised at the firm grip. No problem, Mr. Whitaker, just glad I could help. Samuel reached for his wallet, but Jordan was already backing away. Oh, no, sir, really, I wasn't looking for payment. At least let me— Seriously, it's fine. Just hope it gets you home safe. He gave a quick wave, then walked back to his beat-up motorcycle. As Jordan rode away, he couldn't shake the look on Samuel's face. It hadn't just been gratitude. It had been something deeper, recognition almost. Like the old man had seen something in him that Jordan himself hadn't yet discovered. Behind him, Samuel Whitaker sat motionless, the hum of the chair steady beneath him. Slowly, he pulled out his phone. It's me, he said when the call connected. I need you to run a background check on someone. Jordan Hayes. Yes, I'll spell it out. His eyes dropped to the wheelchair prototype, his company's secret project. The one that had eaten 2 years of research and millions of dollars, yet still stalled on the very problem the boy had just solved in 5 minutes. This wasn't luck. This was something else. That night, Samuel sat alone in his office long after the last employees had gone home. Past midnight, the city skyline glowed against the glass windows, but his gaze stayed fixed on the silent machine in the corner. To outsiders, it was a marvel of engineering, sleek, compact, revolutionary. To him, it was failure incarnate, months of work and the finest minds money could buy, yet no solution to its core flaw. And then, on a random city street, a college kid in grease-stained jeans had fixed it without hesitation. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers drumming the armrest. Jordan Hayes, 22. Calm under pressure. Sharp-eyed. Not intimidated by tech he shouldn't have understood. Confident but not boastful. Solved the problem, explained it clearly, then walked away without asking for a cent. Samuel's jaw tightened. He picked up the phone again. Elaine, he said curtly to his secretary. I need a background check. Jordan Hayes, mechanical engineering student, tonight. Of course, sir. I'll have it ready first thing in the morning. Not in the morning, he interrupted. Now. He hung up before she could argue. For years, Samuel had prided himself on reading people in an instant, slotting them neatly into categories, opportunists, strivers, prodigies. But this young man didn't fit any of them. There was something raw, something unpolished yet undeniable. By dawn, the file was waiting on his desk. He opened it, eyes narrowing as he scanned the pages. Jordan Hayes, raised by a single mother, Sarah Hayes. Accident 8 years ago. Wheelchair-bound since. Low income. High medical debt. Worked nights delivering food, weekends at an auto shop. Full course load in mechanical engineering. Barely scraping through tuition. Samuel's hand stilled on a page with a faded newspaper clipping. Sarah Hayes, smiling despite a headline about the crash that had changed her life. Something in his chest tightened. He remembered the silence after his own wife's death. The restless pacing of his son in the hall. The way he had drowned his grief in work, mistaking wealth for protection, only to find it had built walls instead. The name Jordan Hayes lingered in his mind. A boy with grease on his jeans, fire in his eyes, and hands that moved like they already knew the future. Samuel's son had grown up surrounded by abundance, spoiled, ungrateful, blind to the value of effort. Even now, as a grown man, he only called when he wanted something. Samuel pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. His eyes stung, though he refused to let the tears fall. The contrast wouldn't leave him. His own son, born into comfort, wasting every gift. And Jordan Hayes, duct-taping his backpack together, working nights and weekends, refusing payment for help freely given. A young man whose life was built on weight and struggle, yet carried with quiet strength. He pushed the folder closed and leaned back, the office silent except for the low hum of the city below. His mind replayed images. Sarah straining in her old wheelchair, Jordan kneeling beside her, adjusting the prototype with a precision even his best engineers had missed. It wasn't just skill. It was hunger. It was necessity. By afternoon, he summoned Elaine. She entered carefully, sensing the heaviness in his tone. "You saw the report?" Samuel said. "Yes, sir." She hesitated, then added softly, "Remarkable. I want his address." Jordan met her eyes. She meant every word. He swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his vision. Her hand was small and frail, but it anchored him. He nodded once, silently promising himself he wouldn't quit. The next morning, he arrived earlier than everyone else and stayed later than anyone thought possible. He pored over blueprints, tracing every detail, every flaw others dismissed. He skipped cafeteria chatter, spending breaks in the testing lab, running simulations until the numbers burned behind his eyes. Some nights he rode straight from delivery shifts to the workshop, sketching by fluorescent light until security finally forced him out. Weeks bled into months. The work wore at him, but the fire never dimmed, and slowly, through every late-night sketch, every recalculation, every stubborn refusal to stop, an idea began to take shape. A new cooling system for the motor, simpler, cheaper yet stronger. Jordan had designed it with durable materials no one had considered, pairing it with a frame that shifted weight in subtle ways, reducing the strain on the user's arms and shoulders. Safer, lighter, less costly to manufacture. It wasn't just an upgrade, it was a statement. Mobility should belong to everyone, not just the wealthy. One evening, Clark passed the workshop and found Jordan crouched over a half-assembled frame, forearms smeared with grease, sweat dripping down his temple. "Still trying to prove yourself, kid?" Clark muttered, his voice half amusement, half dismissal. Jordan didn't look up. His wrench turned, tightening the last bolt. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to make something that works." Clark smirked, shook his head, and walked away. But Jordan didn't stop. His hands moved with precision, driven by something no smirk could shake loose. When the prototype was finally ready, Jordan rolled it onto the testing floor himself. His palms were slick, his heartbeat uneven as the team gathered, skeptical eyes on him. He powered the chair on, guided it toward the steep incline of the test ramp. The motor hummed, steady and cool. No stalling, no shutdown. Airflow sliced through the redesigned vents like a quiet wind. The chair climbed higher, smooth and confident, until it reached the top. Jordan braked, turned, and looked back at the room. For the first time, silence filled the space, not out of doubt, but out of surprise. He climbed down slowly, chest tight, hands trembling. "It's lighter, cheaper, safer, and it can be built with parts already in production." The silence lingered, then broke. A junior engineer, eyes wide, whispered, "Damn, that's actually good." Clark's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Later that evening, Samuel rolled onto the testing floor. He examined the prototype in silence, his weathered hands running along the frame. He studied the angles, the seams, the balance. Finally, he lifted his gaze to Jordan, eyes unreadable. "You built this?" Jordan nodded. "Yes, sir. On my own time." Samuel's stare lingered a long moment. Then he nodded, slow but certain. "Good, very good." For Jordan, it wasn't just approval. It was validation. It was being seen, not for the story that had brought him here, but for the work, the skill, the invention itself. That night, back at the apartment, Sarah leaned forward in her chair as Jordan spoke, his hands animated, his eyes alive. For weeks he had carried himself with the heaviness of doubt, but tonight his words came like a flood. Sarah smiled, tears glimmering. "See, baby? I told you. You belong there." Jordan exhaled, exhaustion etched into every line of his face, but his voice carried a strength he hadn't felt in years. "Yeah, Mama. Maybe I do." The auditorium buzzed with energy. Rows of employees, reporters, and partners filled the seats, cameras already trained on the stage. A massive screen behind the podium glowed with the Whitaker Mobility logo, accompanied by the words, "Redefining Freedom." Backstage, Jordan tugged at the lapels of his new suit jacket. He had worn a tie only a handful of times in his life, graduations, a funeral, but tonight, the knot around his neck felt heavier, loaded with meaning. He glanced in the mirror. 25 now, sharper features. A man carved by long nights and harder years. The eyes staring back at him were tired, yes, but this time the fatigue burned with purpose. "Mr. Hayes," a stage manager called. "5 minutes," Jordan nodded, setting down the small note card on the table. He didn't need it. The words were already inside him, pressed deep into his chest. Beside him, Samuel appeared, dressed in a dark suit, his chair polished to a gleam. He looked older than the night he first stepped into Jordan's apartment, but his eyes still cut sharp as glass. "Nervous?" Samuel asked. Jordan let out a shaky breath. "A little." "Good," Samuel replied softly. "Means it matters." He placed a hand on Jordan's arm, his grip steady despite the tremor in his fingers. "You earned this, son." "Don't let anyone tell you different." Jordan's throat tightened. He could only nod. When they rolled and walked onto the stage together, the auditorium erupted in applause. Flashbulbs fired like lightning. Jordan blinked against the lights, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on her. Sarah. She sat proudly in her new chair, the one he had spent months refining, perfecting, pouring every sleepless hour into. The frame was sleek but strong, the controls effortless, the seat contoured for comfort. Her posture sat taller, her hands resting lightly on the wheels. She smiled through tears, her eyes finding his. The applause faded into quiet anticipation. Samuel wheeled to the microphone first. His voice was steady, commanding, but edged with emotion. For decades, Whitaker Mobility has led the way in innovation. But progress does not come from machines alone. It comes from people. People who believe we can do better and refuse to stop until we do. He paused, his eyes moving to Jordan. "Tonight, I pass that belief and this company to someone who embodies it more than anyone I have ever met. Our new head of research and development and my chosen successor as CEO, Mr. Jordan Hayes." The audience surged to its feet. Applause thundered, echoing like a storm. Jordan froze for half a second. Then he stepped forward into the lights, gripping the podium, steadying his hands. "I don't come from money or privilege," he began, his voice low but firm. "I come from late nights fixing engines to pay hospital bills. I come from watching my mother push a broken chair up a hill and swearing I'd find a way to make it easier." He glanced at Sarah. Tears ran freely down her cheeks now, her smile unshaken. "This company gave me a chance when I had nothing but determination. And tonight I stand here because of that chance. And because of her." He gestured toward his mother. The cameras swung instantly. The screens filled with Sarah's face, her hand rising to wipe her tears, her pride unhidden. The applause softened. Not quieter but deeper, carrying warmth. Jordan continued, his voice growing stronger, carried by conviction. "We are not here to build expensive machines for the few. We are here to build safe, reliable, affordable mobility for everyone who needs it. That is our mission. That is our promise," the auditorium erupted. Applause shook the walls. Some of the very employees who had doubted him stood clapping the hardest, their faces lit with pride, and then the curtain rose. Behind him, row upon row of the new wheelchair model gleamed under the stage lights, the design Jordan had birthed from grease-stained sketches and sleepless nights. Cameras flashed, reporters rushed forward, and the room roared with the sound of change. Engineers explained specs in clipped, technical tones, but all eyes shifted when Sarah rolled forward. Her new chair glided across the stage with a grace she hadn't known in years. No jerks, no stalls, no strain. Her hands moved with steady ease, her posture lifted, her smile radiant. The crowd erupted, not at the numbers on a slide, but at the sight of a woman reclaiming motion. When the speeches ended, Jordan stepped back from the podium. Reporters surged in, Microphones thrust toward him, employees pressing close for handshakes and congratulations. He answered with polite smiles, but his focus wasn't on the cameras. At the edge of the stage, a small cluster of families waited. Among them sat a boy, maybe 8 years old, in an old chair that squeaked with every shift of his weight. His mother crouched beside him, fussing with a fraying strap. The boy's eyes darted around, nervous, his hands clutching the worn wheels. Jordan excused himself from the reporters and crossed the stage. He dropped to one knee so he was eye level with the boy, ignoring the flash of cameras exploding behind him. "Hey, buddy," Jordan said softly. "How's the chair treating you?" The boy shrugged. "It's old. The wheel sticks sometimes." Jordan leaned in, fingers brushing the axle. The bolt was loose, the bearings dry. From his pocket, he pulled a small tool. He always carried one, a habit he'd never broken. With careful turns, he adjusted the bolt until the wheels spun smooth and free. Then he sat back, smiling. "There. Try it now." The boy pushed. The chair rolled forward, easier, lighter. His eyes lit up. "It works!" His mother pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, her eyes filling. Jordan gave her a reassuring nod, then reached up to ruffle the boy's hair. "You'll have something even better soon. I promise," the cameras snapped furiously, capturing the image that would flood headlines the next morning. The new CEO, in a suit, crouched on the floor, fixing a child's wheelchair with his own hands. But what moved the crowd wasn't the spectacle, it was the truth of the moment. Honest, human. Jordan rose slowly, brushing his palms against his slacks, the faint trace of grease still clinging there. Across the room, his eyes found Sarah's. She was smiling at him through tears, her pride etched deep in every line of her face. For Jordan, that was the only approval that mattered. As the night wound down, reporters filed their stories. Employees clustered in small groups, buzzing about the company's future. Investors whispered about markets, patents, profits. But Samuel Whitaker, watching from the shadows at the edge of the stage, wasn't thinking of numbers. For the first time in years, he felt not ambition, not drive, but relief. Relief that the empire he had built was no longer his alone. He had found someone worthy to carry it forward, someone who understood that this work was never about machines, but about people. Jordan lingered near the stage, answering questions, thanking those who approached. But his mind wasn't on accolades. It was on the boy whose chair he'd just adjusted, on his mother sitting in the front row, on every family who had lived too long with less than they deserved. When the lights dimmed and the hall began to empty, he finally let out a long breath. He looked down at his hands. They were the same hands that had carried textbooks in a duct-taped backpack, that had turned wrenches in midnight garages, that had held his mother's trembling ones through nights of pain. Now those same hands carried something larger, not just machines, not just invention, but responsibility and hope, and Jordan Hayes wasn't going to let either slip from his grip. "What's your name, son?" the man asked, his voice low but steady. Jordan Hayes." The old man extended his hand, grip surprisingly firm despite his age. Samuel Whitaker. "And I cannot thank you enough for this." Jordan shook his hand briefly, already stepping back. "No need, sir. Just glad you're rolling again." Samuel reached for his wallet, but Jordan lifted a hand, shaking his head. "Please, I wasn't looking for payment, just helping out. Surely I can—" "Really, it's fine." Jordan gave a small smile, swinging a leg over his motorcycle. "Just take care of yourself, Mr. Whitaker." And with that, he rode off, engine growling into the evening air. He didn't notice the way Samuel's eyes followed him. He didn't see the sharp curiosity hardening in the man's expression. He couldn't have known that this chance encounter had already shifted the ground beneath his feet. Samuel lingered at the base of the hill, his wheelchair humming softly. He pulled out his phone, pressing a familiar number. "It's me," he said when the line clicked. "I need you to run a background check. A student, Jordan Hayes." He spelled it out carefully, his gaze still fixed on the empty street where Jordan had vanished. Because the truth was simple. Samuel Whitaker was no ordinary man stranded on a hill. He was the founder of Whitaker Mobility, the most powerful name in assistive technology. And the chair Jordan had just revived was no ordinary wheelchair. It was a prototype his engineers had spent 2 years failing to perfect, a prototype that had stalled again and again on that very overheating fault. His best minds hadn't solved it, but a kid in duct-taped boots had, in minutes. Samuel closed the call and sat silently for a long moment. The city moved around him, horns, footsteps, laughter, but all he could hear was the echo of Jordan's calm voice explaining airflow and safety systems. All he could see was those steady hands, fixing what millions of dollars had not. For years, Samuel had trusted his instincts about people. Tonight, his instincts screamed that he had just met someone rare, someone raw, someone who carried hunger in his bones, and Samuel Whitaker never ignored his instincts. Jordan Hayes. The man's hand extended, steady despite his age. Samuel Whitaker. And I cannot thank you enough. Jordan took it, surprised by the firmness of the grip. No problem, Mr. Whitaker. Just glad I could help. Samuel's fingers twitched toward his wallet, but Jordan was already stepping back. Oh, no, sir, really, I wasn't looking for payment. At least let me... Seriously, it's fine. Just hope it gets you home safe. Jordan flashed a brief smile, raised a hand in farewell, and turned toward his beat-up motorcycle, its chipped paint gleaming faintly under the streetlight. As he rode off into the night, exhaust echoing down the narrow street, the image of Samuel's face lingered with him. It hadn't just been gratitude. It had been recognition, a kind of silent weight in the man's eyes, like he'd seen something in Jordan that Jordan himself hadn't yet named. Behind him, Samuel sat motionless, the soft hum of the prototype chair steady beneath him. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into his blazer and pulled out a phone. "It's me," he said when the call connected. His tone was calm, but laced with steel. "I need a background check. Name's Jordan Hayes. Yes, I'll spell it." His gaze fell to the chair beneath him. The company's secret project. 2 years of research. Millions of dollars. Countless prototypes. The brightest minds on his payroll. And the same flaw, over and over again. Overheating on inclines. A flaw that a kid in grease-stained jeans had diagnosed and bypassed in 5 minutes. That night, long after the last employee badge had clicked out, Samuel sat alone in his glass-walled office. Midnight bled into 2 a.m. The city skyline pulsed beyond the windows, but he barely saw it. His attention stayed locked on the silent prototype resting in the corner. To the world, it was an engineering marvel, sleek, futuristic, revolutionary. To Samuel, it was a wound, a reminder of every limitation, every failure his empire couldn't solve. And then, on a random street, a college kid had touched it once and made it breathe. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning under his weight, fingers drumming against the armrest. Jordan Hayes, 22. Calm, unflinching. No hesitation when confronted with unfamiliar tech. His hands had moved with purpose, his explanation clear, precise. He hadn't bragged, hadn't asked for credit or money. He had fixed the problem and walked away. Samuel's jaw tightened. He lifted the phone again. "Elaine," he said when his secretary answered, voice groggy with sleep. "Background check. Jordan Hayes. Mechanical engineering student. Tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight." "Yes, sir." "Understood." By dawn, a thick folder waited on his desk. He opened it with steady hands, though his pulse hammered. Jordan Hayes, born and raised in the city. Father absent. Mother, Sarah Hayes, paralyzed in an accident 8 years ago. Wheelchair-bound since. Low income. Mountains of medical debt. Jordan worked nights delivering food, weekends fixing cars in a shop. Still maintained a full mechanical engineering course load. Barely affording tuition, but somehow keeping pace. Samuel paused on a yellowed newspaper clipping tucked into the file. A grainy photo of Sarah Hayes, smiling bravely despite the headline, "Local Teacher Paralyzed in Crash." He closed his eyes. The memory of his own wife's absence clawed at him, the hospital silence, the smell of antiseptic, the way grief had fractured his home. He saw his son again, pacing the halls, angry at the world but drowning in privilege, mistaking wealth for meaning. Samuel had poured everything into his empire, but his fortune had made his son careless, hollow. Now, in black and white, the contrast seared him. His own boy, wasteful, aimless. And this young man, duct tape on his backpack, grease under his nails, shouldering more than most grown men would ever face, yet standing steady. Jordan Hayes didn't just survive. He built. Samuel pushed the folder closed, the weight of it heavy in his lap. The city hummed below. His mind replayed the sight of Sarah struggling in her broken chair. Jordan crouched beside her, hands sure, eyes burning with determination. It wasn't only skill. It was necessity. Hunger. Fire. By the afternoon, Elaine stepped quietly into his office. Her expression was cautious. She had seen the report too. "You saw it?" Samuel asked. "Yes, sir." She hesitated, then allowed the word to slip out. "Remarkable?" "I want his address." Her brow furrowed. "Sir, maybe it would be better to reach out formally. Invite him here. Keep it professional?" Samuel's eyes, sharp as glass, pinned her. His voice was quiet but final. "This isn't business, Elaine." The room seemed to shrink around those words. Elaine adjusted her glasses, nodded once, and left. An hour later, she returned, a slip of paper in her hand. The address was scrawled neatly, a modest apartment complex far from downtown. The kind of neighborhood Samuel hadn't walked through in decades. His driver was already waiting with the car. But Samuel didn't rush. He sat with the slip of paper balanced in his palm, weighing it like it might tip the scales of his entire future. This wasn't strategy. It wasn't profit. It was personal. It was dangerous hope. He set the folder aside, gripped his cane, and rose. "Tell the driver I'll be down in 5. Jordan blinked, stunned. His throat went dry. He looked from Samuel to his mother, then back again, searching for some sign that this was a joke. You can't be serious," Jordan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Samuel's eyes didn't waver. "Deadly serious. Do you think I came here to hand out compliments? I built Whitaker Mobility from nothing but a sketch and a stubborn refusal to accept limits. And I can tell when I've met someone who carries that same fire. You may not see it in yourself yet, but I do." Jordan shifted his weight, crossing his arms tighter. "I'm just a student. I can't even afford next semester's tuition. I fix things because I have to. That doesn't make me—" "Listen to me." Samuel's voice cut through the air, quiet but commanding, the kind of tone that had silenced boardrooms and bent investors to his will. "What you did wasn't luck. It wasn't desperation. It was mastery. Raw, unpolished, but real. And I won't stand by and let it waste away under bills and exhaustion." Sarah's hand trembled against her lap. Her eyes searched Samuel's face as if afraid to believe him. "What exactly are you saying?" she asked softly. Samuel turned to her, and for the first time his voice gentled. "I'm saying your son has a mind built for more than scraping by. I'm saying he deserves tools, training, and a stage to prove what he can do. And I'm saying I'd like to give him that chance." Jordan's heart hammered. He wanted to believe it, but suspicion gnawed at him. Offers like this didn't just fall from the sky? And what do you get out of it? He asked flatly. Samuel met his gaze without blinking. "I get someone who sees what others overlook. Someone who doesn't accept that good enough is good enough. My company has engineers who are skilled. Brilliant, even. But they've grown comfortable. He leaned forward, voice lowering. "You're hungry. Hunger builds revolutions." The words hit like a hammer. Sarah's eyes filled again, though she tried to blink the tears away. Jordan swallowed hard, fists tightening at his sides. He felt the old ache in his chest. The years of struggle, the nights of exhaustion, the quiet promises he had whispered to himself when no one was listening. "Mr. Whitaker," Jordan's voice cracked despite his effort to keep it steady. "Why me?" Samuel held his gaze. And for the first time, his sharpness softened into something else, something fragile, almost human. "Because I see a younger version of myself in you, and because I won't make the same mistake twice. I won't let potential die just because the world is too blind or too cruel to nurture it." The silence that followed was thick. charged. Sarah reached for Jordan's hand, squeezing it with quiet urgency. Samuel waited, patient but unyielding, the hum of his chair filling the space between them. Finally, Jordan exhaled, his voice barely audible. "What exactly are you offering me?" Samuel's lips curved into the faintest knowing smile. "A chance to change everything?" Jordan's words hung in the air, steady as steel. Clark smirked, but there was an edge to it now, like he didn't quite know whether to mock or retreat. He shook his head and walked away, muttering under his breath. Jordan stayed focused, every turn of the wrench measured, deliberate. Hours later, when the prototype stood complete, he stepped back, breath ragged, chest pounding with equal parts exhaustion and anticipation. The frame gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light. The redesigned cooling ducts curved elegantly into the motor housing, airflow maximized with nothing wasted. The structure looked leaner, lighter, but it felt strong, solid, alive. The next morning, he rolled the chair into the testing bay himself. His palms were damp, but his grip didn't falter. The engineering team gathered reluctantly, arms folded, skeptical smirks plastered across their faces. Even Clark stood off to the side, jaw set, eyes narrowed. Jordan powered the chair. The motor came alive with a low hum, steady, smooth, unwavering. He guided it up the steep incline of the test ramp, every step of the climb feeling like his own heartbeat. The chair ascended without stutter, without heat warnings, without the dreaded shutdown. At the top, he let it idle. Silence spread across the room. Not disbelief anymore, something closer to awe. Jordan climbed down slowly, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. "It's lighter," he explained, voice even. "Cheaper, safer, and it can be built with parts we already have in production." For a beat, no one spoke. Then a junior engineer muttered, almost against his will, "Damn! That's actually good." The words cracked the silence. Clark's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Hours later, Samuel Whitaker appeared on the floor. His chair rolled forward quietly, yet his presence commanded every gaze in the room. He stopped at the prototype, running his hand along the frame as if he could read the design through touch alone. He inspected every detail, then lifted his eyes to Jordan. "You built this?" Samuel asked, voice calm but edged with weight. Jordan nodded. "Yes, sir. On my own time." Samuel held his gaze for a long moment, the room holding its breath. Finally he spoke, low but certain. "Good. Very good." For Jordan, it wasn't just approval. It was validation, not for the scholarship, not for the story, for the work, for what his hands had built. That night back home, Sarah listened as her son recounted every detail, his hands moving with unrestrained energy for the first time in weeks. She smiled through tears, pride radiating from her tired eyes. "See, baby, I told you. You belong there." Jordan smiled faintly, weariness still in his bones, but there was strength in his voice now. "Yeah, Mama, maybe I do." The crowd quieted, hanging on every word. Jordan drew a breath, his voice steadying as he went on. "My mother is the reason I ever picked up a wrench, the reason I pushed through nights when quitting would have been easier. She taught me that strength isn't loud, it's steady. It's sacrifice, and it's love." The room was utterly silent. Even the reporters with cameras lowered their lenses for a moment, listening. He placed both hands on the podium, his knuckles pale, but his tone grew stronger, fuller. Mobility is not a luxury. It's not a privilege reserved for the few. It's freedom. And freedom should belong to everyone, no matter their income, no matter their circumstance, no matter their story. Applause rippled through the hall, swelling until it shook the walls. But Jordan didn't stop. "My design isn't the finish line. It's a beginning, a step toward a world where no family has to choose between groceries and a chair that works, where innovation doesn't climb ivory towers, but rolls through every neighborhood, every hospital, every home." His voice cracked once, but it only made the words land harder. "That's the future I want to build. That's the future Whitaker Mobility will build, with all of us, together." The auditorium exploded. The applause wasn't polite now, it was raw, unrestrained, a standing ovation that refused to end. Flashbulbs fired, but Jordan didn't look at the cameras. He looked at Sarah. She sat straighter than he had ever seen her, her tears glistening in the stage lights, her smile radiant and unbroken. She raised a hand slightly, just enough for him to see it tremble in pride. Jordan's chest tightened. For years he had dreamed of giving her more than duct tape and second-hand repairs. Now, she sat in a chair of his own making, while the world applauded the vision she had inspired. Beside him, Samuel leaned close, his voice low. "Only for Jordan to hear. I told you, son," he murmured, a rare softness breaking through the steel in his tone. "You belong here." Jordan nodded once, unable to speak. His throat burned, his eyes stung, but he held firm at the podium, standing in the storm of applause. This time, he believed it. He belonged.